Grammar Girl is brought to you by Babbel. This summer, my goal is to learn how to speak Spanish with Babbel, the #1 selling language learning app in the world. Learn Spanish, French, Italian, German, Russian, Swedish, and more through interactive dialogues, speech recognition, and fun trainers and quizzes, either online or in the Babbel app. Get 50% off your first 3 months with the code GG when you go to Babbel, babbel.com/GG. That's Babbel, babbel.com/GG, and the offer code GG for 50% off your first 3 months. Grammar Girl here, I'm Mignon Fogarty. This week, I have a quick and dirty tip about the 2 spellings of Trouper, and a meaty middle about a bunch of fun phrases that use the word be, including why we call it a spelling bee. Let's get started. After the recent segment about why the word troop can refer to one person or a group of people, a listener named Michael asked whether it's possible that since a trooper is another name for a soldier, that the singular use of troop for one soldier came from shortening the word trooper to troop. Well, the first use of troop as a word to refer to just one soldier came hundreds of years after people started calling units of soldiers troops. And Michael's instincts are right. The Oxford English Dictionary entry for troop as a singular noun says that in some cases it is, quote, perhaps an abbreviation of trooper, unquote. And this also brings us to a related topic, the difference between trooper, spelled Trooper, and trooper, spelled Trouper. Both words came into English from French words for a company or a band of people. But they came into English at different times, and they developed different meanings in English. All around the English-speaking world, troopers, Troopers, are police or military men and women on horseback. And in the United States, trooper also refers to state police officers. For example, you'd say, I got a ticket from a state trooper last week. Moving on to the other spelling, an acting company is a troupe, Troupe. You could say, the troupe is scheduled to perform in Paris next week, and that's troupe, Troupe. So an actor in such a group is called a trooper, Trouper. And when someone powers through an illness or a tough role, he or she is sometimes called a real trooper. You'd say, boy, that Susan is a real trooper. The original phrase about someone persevering despite adversity came from the theater. And until about 1970, everyone agreed that the only correct spelling was a real trooper spelled with a U. But then, real trooper, Trooper, started showing up in published books more and more often until it surpassed the other spelling in the late 90s. The change is more dramatic in American English, but it's happening in British English too. Comparing the entry for trooper in the last 2 editions of Brian Garner's English usage books highlights the change. The 2009 edition calls the OOPER spelling invariably inferior, and pegs its use in place of the correct spelling as stage 2 in his language change index, which he says means widely shunned and is roughly equivalent to audible belching. But the newer 2016 edition upgrades the trend to stage 3, which means it's now widespread but avoided in careful usage. Gardner calls his stage 3 roughly equivalent to overloud talking. So that's your quick and dirty tip. If you want to be correct, remember that a real trooper is like a member of an acting group who goes on stage with a fever, and spell trooper with a U. But keeping that spelling intact is probably a losing battle in the long run, because if you saw my TED Talk, you know that in English, people essentially vote for spelling and usage, and people seem to be voting for the other spelling. Before we get to B words, if you're trying to get into grad school, you need to score well on the GRE, GMAT, LSAT, or MCAT. Fortunately, Magoosh Online Test Prep helps you get to test day feeling confident and prepared without breaking the bank. At magoosh.com, you'll find tons of practice questions, study schedules, video lessons, and access to their expert tutor team if you need extra help. And if you're retaking the test, Magoosh offers a score improvement guarantee. If you don't improve, you'll get your money back. One student who used Magoosh to study for the GRE says, quote, "The hard vocab in the practice problems really benefited me because on the actual test, there was maybe one word I didn't know. The video lessons and explanations were excellent. They cut to the chase and really just told me what I needed to know for the test." Unquote. Another student who used Magoosh to improve his GMAT verbal score by 6 points says, quote, "My quant skills were already good, but I needed to improve my verbal score. The SC and CR question sets and explanations are amazing." Unquote. Visit magoosh.com and enter the promo code GRAMMAR for a 20% discount. That's magoosh.com and the promo code GRAMMAR. And now, on to bees. To get us started, a longtime listener in Prague named Yuri asked why spelling bees are called bees. What is a bee? The most common explanation is that we can trace it back to the buzzing insects. Bees are cooperative and social. They live and work together in a hive, and people seem to perceive them as always working. As far back as the 1500s, people were saying busy workers were as busy as bees. Hundreds of years later, the word bee was being used to describe events, like quilting bees and husking bees, where people would get together to do work like those buzzing, cooperative, and social insects. Although a spelling bee is more of a competition than a social working group, it still took on the name. Maybe because it was a social activity for the community and spelling kind of seemed like work. So that's the origin in the Oxford English Dictionary and in Etymology Online. Unfortunately, Merriam-Webster and the American Heritage Dictionary give a different origin for the social work gathering meaning of the word bee. Those sources say that bee comes from the Middle English word bene, B-E-N-E, which described the voluntary help you give to neighbors, such as farmers who need to raise a barn or husk a lot of corn. So it seems the origin of the word bee is still up for debate, but either way, it goes back to old-time social gatherings. Other fun phrases that use the word bee are the bee's knees, a bee in your bonnet, bees and honey, to make a beeline for something, and to put the bee on someone. I covered the bee's knees almost 3 years ago, but for those of you who weren't listening then or don't remember, it's 1920s slang that means something similar to delightful, that was part of a group of similar phrases based on animals, such as the cat's pajamas and the monkey's eyebrows. The origin of a bee in your bonnet is more obvious. It simply relates to the agitation or intense focus you'd have if you had a literal bee in your hat or bonnet. You wouldn't think about much else until you resolved the problem. The PhraseFinder website believes the phrase may be of Scottish origin because of some early references and because Scottish men wore caps called bonnets around the time the phrase emerged. In its earliest uses, it usually referred to someone who was thought to be crazy or eccentric. It could also relate to another phrase, to have bees in the head, which is even more closely associated with having an irrational or crazy obsession. Moving on, bees and honey is apparently Cockney rhyming slang for the word money. For example, I found a clip on YouTube where a British man is trying to rob another man and says, "Give me the bees," which he explains is short for bees and honey, meaning money. The Guardian says that rhyming slang is about more than just rhyming, that the slang can also have a logical story behind it. And in this case, we go back again to the busy, hard-working nature of bees. You work to get sweet money, just like bees work to get that sweet, sweet honey. Beeline is another obvious one related to the behavior of bees. To make a beeline for something is to take the shortest path to it, just like bees always seem to take the shortest path back to their hive or to a source of pollen or nectar after another bee tells them where to find it. Finally, to put the B on someone seems to be a phrase that peaked in the 1940s. It means to put an end to something or to ask or pressure someone for money. I couldn't find anything about the origin of the put an end to something meaning, but the asking for money meaning ultimately seems related to the volunteering for the community benefit origin. It seems that on the American frontier, there often wasn't enough money to pay preachers. So, just like the community would gather in a bee to help a farmer husk corn, the community would gather in a bee to raise money or goods for the preacher. And if people didn't donate, the organizers would pressure them. And that aggressive asking or begging for money or gifts came to be known as putting the bee on someone. The Oxford English Dictionary also says it could be related to the phrase to sting someone, which seems to have arisen around the same time. For example, they have a citation from 1931 from the book American Tramp and Underworld Slang that says, quote, "To say I put the bee on him usually means that the donor has been stung when he gives up the loan, since it is seldom repaid," unquote. And for a further extension, a footnote in H.L. Mencken's book, The American Language, says in addition to put the bee on someone, the phrase to buzz someone also meant to wheedle money. Isn't English fun? I'm Mignon Fogarty, better known as Grammar Girl. Stitcher Premium subscribers get a monthly bonus episode, and I just released the new one about the many words for marijuana. Plus, you get ad-free access to the entire archive of Grammar Girl episodes and all the other great Stitcher Premium shows like Marvel's Wolverine: The Long Night. Sign up at stitcherpremium.com/grammar and use the code GRAMMAR for a free month. That's all. Thanks for listening.